very exciting. And so before I fully introduce you, let's bring our Heavenly Father into the mix because that's paramount with what we're going through and can't do anything without him. So, dear Heavenly Father, we come before you now. And as always, I'm just so thankful for this opportunity to come before the people to just share information and people with my audience that you have laid upon my heart to share with them, Father. And I just thank you so much for what John is doing. To stand in the gap for so many people and to just bring forth change in our the world around us. And as we find ourselves in such trying times, and we have to look forward to good days ahead, which we're so thankful for, Father, I just ask for your guidance and direction and your hedge of protection around us so that we can continue to do the work that you have set out for us to do, Father. We can't do it without you. And so I'm so thankful for John and all that he's doing. May you just continue to guide him, direct him, and lead him in your light to where you need him to go, Father, and just give him the continued wisdom, courage, and endurance that he needs to fulfill your will, Father. And so I just thank you for this opportunity. May those that are listening be those that need to hear this, Father, and may you bless us all during these times, and just thank you for every moment that you give us. In your precious name, Jesus, amen.
Amen.
So let me tell our audience a little bit about you, and then we'll get into the mix. So John Matthew is a 40-year-old dad on a duty to break the generational chains that bind so many. A journey that starts with justice for family members, survivors of sexual, physical abuse, along with a deep-rooted feeling that something was terribly wrong in America that led to a mission that would not only change his life, but positively impact the lives of many for generations to come. An ambitious builder of both business and life, sparked an 11-plus-year journey to turn tragedy into triumph by giving tools and resources to everyone and show their true ability to build and grow their life as God intended, not man. You're a stable base built on faith of God, love of family and country, a man of firm faith and foundation. You studied law for 7+ years, including history and origins. A family business owner and business builder, and a founder of the Self-Governing Academy, the National Testimony, and the National Records. You're also an advocate for law, self-governing, alternative self-care, survivors, trauma victims, and vax injured. So that's a lot. It's those are hard shoes to fill, I'm sure, but I'm so thankful for all that you're doing. And so I did give a little bit of a rundown, but I'd like you to just kind of tell us what really has led you into this, and what's brought you to this place and time now that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Audra, too, for everything that you and your team are doing. And, the word team it doesn't do it justice, but it really is what we're doing. We're putting together small teams, and we're putting our puzzle pieces together and making it happen. And that's really what kind of was the thought at the beginning, was that I knew I couldn't do everything myself. And this was something that had sparked really a deep-rooted element as a little child, because sexual trauma and abuse plagued my family. So, my parents both had suffered from it, as well as my sister. So I learned this early on as a child, and I just felt helpless. There was nothing I could do at that time. And when I was getting, older, it really started bothering me, but in a more profound way. And so after high school, I started, just typical day-to-day stuff, just moving on with life, and in the meantime trying to just search. I was just searching, just aimlessly searching, it seemed, and digging into a lot of different things. But I was always fairly rooted in my faith. It's just it really didn't all fully come together until I'd say the last 10 years, most specifically. So it really was kind of a mission that was deeply embedded, but it wouldn't play out till later on. And so you can see what's transpired just in our country over the last 20 years, but how many people this has affected. And I had my son in 2013, and it changed everything in my life, everything. It was the most incredible time in my life, becoming a dad. And it was the most unexpected feeling too. A lot of my friends were having kids at that time, or prior to me having my son, and I was kind of like, I'm good. I don't want to hold your baby. I feel like I might break it, and it wasn't like I didn't like kids. I liked them. It was just like I was afraid to hold them because I might break them. So, when my son was born, I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to hold him. I just, it was just instant attachment. I was
Something
there.
you don't want to put him down, probably,
Yeah, I never wanted to let him go, and that hasn't changed one iota. And I was there. His mom, she had a C-section, so it was really interesting too, because when I was born, I was wrapped up in the cord. My mom had to have a C-section. She ended up getting sepsis, so it was like real hit or miss. And when my son was born, it was the same thing. His heart rate was dropping. They found the cord was wrapped around him. I had jaundice, he had jaundice, so it was like, wow, these similarities are
right?
really crazy similar. But anyways, so I was there, I was all in there, and like medical and all that guts and blood, that doesn't bother me. So the doctor, he kind of looked to the side, and he's like, wow, he's like, I've never quite ever seen anything like this before. He's like, this is fascinating. This is new. And I was like, what? He's like, well, you're asking if that's a gallbladder, and if like, and just random questions like that. So, anyways, I was hooked from the start, because I was like, this is incredible, how life is here and happening.
Yes.
So it changed my life for the good forever. So fast forward, I would say a short time after that, between, I'd say, like 9 months after, there were issues with um, my son's mom, and I tried to help as much as I could, but it's one of those things where we can't help everybody, unfortunately, and there's a lot of things that plagued her in her life, that were just bigger than me at the time. And so it was definitely a court battle for a while. And for a while, I mean, 4.5 years, almost 5 years. And I ended up getting sole custody of primary placement. And, it was kind of at that point in time, all's history. And, I wanted my son to have a relationship with his mom. I never not wanted to. I mean, I wanted, that perfect family, the ideal, white picket fence sort of situation. But, life has other things going on. So it wasn't anything that was, I'd say, too catastrophic, because I knew that at some point it would remedy itself. How that would play out, I wasn't quite sure, and it's still being played out as we speak. But I didn't prepare fully for what was going to come next, because during this time, or after the time that this was all worked out, things were great. Things were really moving naturally and how they should be. And I at that point was already into studying law. I wanted to become a lawyer, and I kind of went down that road and decided to take other avenues, because I just found out some of the depths of what I didn't want to get into.
Right.
So needless to say, I still continued to pursue, at least education, just other avenues. I didn't want to go down the road of becoming a bar member.
Right.
And so my education continued, but it was also educating and outreach at the same time. And so I really kind of took it to another level of, what, I need to apply what I've learned, and I need to start at the legislative level in my state. And that's what I inevitably did, and got a group together on Facebook, and we started learning about a lot of the history and depths of a lot of current corruption matters, as well as things that plagued so many people out there. And that's where really the true focus about the children came into play, because it affected my grandparents, my grandparents, my parents, so on and so forth. And this is those generational curses, those chains that have just plagued my family and so many others, unfortunately. So I knew that I had to start somewhere. And so we had a group together, and I was going to petition essentially for a change in legislation, because at that time there was an element that was really disgusting and disturbing, and that was for any sexual assault trauma survivors. There's a statute of limitations as far as when you could have any sort of justice served, and
Right.
that was so inherently wrong on every level, and I had to find out why. So around that time, that was, I'd say, between 2017 and 2018, is when we were really putting a lot of things together. I was doing a lot of singular work on my end, as well as group efforts. And then 2019, 2020 hit and everything changed because, come to find out that Facebook was, scraping our info and
Yep.
digging into our lives in every way, shape, and form. And, we were put on fun lists and red flagged and all sorts of fun stuff. And I ended up going to a prayer rally in Madison, which is the capital of my state. And this was before January 6th, but inevitably, come to find out, this really happened in every 50 state, all the 50 states, I should say, and it was more than just DC that January 6th happened to, because it was really just, quite frankly, just a complete FBI federal overreach sort of installation that was done to categorize us, mislabel us, and all the sorts. So yeah, I got put on lists after that. And I was actually told by somebody gave me a heads up. They said, just be careful. There's some agents here who are undercover. They're acting undercover. And I said, well, okay, the Capitol's closed anyways, which was kind of interesting to me because this was in October of 2020. This was before the election. So this
Right.
was like, I mean, here I'm thinking I'm going to go to Madison, and hey, if I'm there, I might as well drop off some notices to them. And it was all closed up, completely buttoned up. So there was literally a church group that was there. People were walking around with flags. Nobody entered in. Nothing crazy happened. It was the definition of peaceful, but apparently just being on those grounds with other people there with prying eyes and ears, they wanted to push a different narrative. So
Right.
that's inevitably what set off, a deeper rooted element, which then, a lot of the attacks, the false narratives, the swatting, the false arrests, and everything took place on my end, which inevitably led to, the kidnapping on one level, and then the kidnapping on the, administrative level of my son. So there was the actual physical kidnapping of him, with some rogue elements involved and bad actors, as well as, I don't want to get too far because there's some ongoing cases still, but let's just say, people who are supposed to be in service to us, our public servants, were unfortunately some of the people involved in not only the elements of the kidnapping itself, but the complete, just disgusting, disturbing nature of all the criminal acts and the cover-ups afterwards. So
Right.
yeah, that really is kind of a brief synopsis of what has transpired and what has led up to this point in time. Because like I said, a lot of these things are still ongoing,
Right.
but it's for a bigger purpose. What ended up opening up was something from a local level, sort of like overreach. Just your typical things like just harassment and stuff like that, which I know all too well,
Yeah. Yeah.
unfortunately. But it's one thing to harass and drive by hundreds of times throughout a week. I mean, obnoxiously, just sitting there and like staking your house out and stuff like that, to like, I mean, just way higher levels of involvement, because it's like I relentlessly pursued stopping this, and
Mhm.
it wasn't anything that I wanted. It came to my front door. I wasn't pursuing any of these people. They were the ones who initiated all of this, sort of, criminal, well, not sort of, but it was criminal corruption and
Right.
malfeasance. And, inevitably affected, my life in more profound ways. I mean, in the meantime, my dad had so many health issues at that point in time. He had, already gone through two bouts of a stroke. So it's like he had a stroke twice. He had emphysema. He had, or COPD, I should say. He had a heart attack. He had a stent in his neck, and that was just the beginning of it. So he was already sick. Then he started developing signs of dementia. Well, we knew something more was going on. So then it just hyper accelerated and turned into brain cancer, and he ended up having 4 glioblastomas. Well, during this time where my mom, I ended up taking care of my dad while he was at home and helping my mom. And, they were still relentlessly attacking both not only myself, but my mom as well. And this is all while we are trying to take care of, my dad who's dying, who, not to mention, it's like, I mean, I don't want to throw this in there just as kind of like, a caveat or a kicker, but, he was an honorable service member to our army, and he really did a lot as much as he could, after that as well. And it was really disturbing when a lot of this was going on, and the VA did so little for him. And when we ended up going to a hospital for better care, because we fortunately had one of the allegedly best cancer facilities in the country. Um, it, it was just it was even worse because I wasn't even able to see him half the time, because they were just like trying to watch me like I was going to do something. It was just unbelievable what was going on. So we finally brought him home on home care, and that was the best decision we could ever make. But I mean, still, even at that point, I remember one morning he wandered out of the house and ended up the street, and the police took him away, and they tried to accuse me of you know doing something to him, which, I mean, he got out of the hospital and he had bruises on his arms from the inside of the arms from
Yeah.
where they're putting the IV, and they had restrained him at one point in time because he was just kicking and yelling. But I mean, it's like, these are things that obviously, I didn't do, but they tried to lay it out as if I did, and then they took him to a different hospital where he had no care at, without our consent. And then they tried to hide him from us, and then they broke into my mom's house and tried to, do whatever, search for me or whatever they were trying to find. I don't know what exactly they were trying to do or what their objective was, but it's like that was one of the times that the swatting occurred, and it was so unbelievable because it's like, what is wrong with you people? Like, do you have zero compassion of a family that's going through this like unbelievable time? And they knew it. They were well aware of it. We had informed them about this, and they just, it was like they were so hell bent on controlling the narrative because of all the screw ups that they made, because of all of the nonsense that they did, because they didn't have anything,
Right.
and it was just an
So they have to
unfortunate
make something
situation.
out of nothing, basically, or
Yeah,
something that it wasn't there. Yeah.
right. They had to create scenarios,
Mhm.
inevitably, is what it was. And I saw it, a mile away, and it was just something like, believe me, I could have pursued this so many different ways over this period of time. But one of the most difficult things is just letting some of it play out, because there is a bigger effort here, and I knew that. And it was really, really hard. Like, it was really hard not immediately ending some of it at that time, because that's where I had to use strength in other ways that I knew, right? I had to assert my rights, I had to enforce my rights, I had to get these things on the record, I had to do it the right way, the smart way, because if I didn't, I would have nothing to stand on. I would have zero standing whatsoever. And so now it's so insurmountable. The evidence has been collected, but also, well, in one of the cases it's sealed, but unfortunately, it will come out. It's just a matter of time. It's not always our time. It's God's
That's right.
time, inevitably.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting what he has us go through to get us to where we need to be in order to do his work. And it's very trying sometimes, but it's like we have to go through those things in order to be ready, to be refined, to be in the place and the state of mind and all of those things that we need to be in order to do the things that he's laid out for us. And so it sucks, but at the same time, it's like when we can use it to help other people, that's when it's so great. I mean, nobody wants to go through trials and tribulations, but I feel like it helps us grow, and we wouldn't be who we are without that. And so even though it's tough, it's a blessing, even though it can seem like a curse. So I'm encouraged because so what has transferred, like, so now tell me about the foundation and those things and like how this has kind of led you to be doing those things.
Yeah, and it's bad. I have to laugh sometimes because I'm looking back and I'm thinking, man, these were pretty crazy times. They really, really were. And I mean, I couldn't imagine. I laugh at myself because of how some of the times I reacted to the situations, but it was because I was probably a little arrogant at the time too, and I'd get pissed off at myself too. But when it comes down to it, it's like, seriously, like, who gave these people the authority?
Right.
Like, who gave you the authority to do any of this to me? I sure as heck didn't. As a matter of fact, I said, no, don't stop. No means no, I thought.
Right.
This doesn't apply just to women, but I mean, it applies to everybody. You know what I mean?
Yes,
And it's like, when
that's
it
right.
comes to somebody saying, no, stop. And this is where it becomes really, really minute in the minutia of things, right? Because language is everything,
Mhm.
everything. And it has been a mass form of manipulation tool and tactic for eons. I mean, this is they have used this, and when I mean I mean evil elements, let's just say,
Yeah.
has been using these as tools to detract, distract. It's deception. It's all it is, really.
That's right.
And so language in our form of communication now is so deep in so many different elements. It's unbelievable. And they will trick you and they will deceive you in every way, shape, and form into an agreement or consent. And
That's
that's the
right.
biggest takeaway. So when, to kind of answer your question, the reason why I preface that is because if we don't educate ourselves in what we need to, and if we can't grasp what we're seeing, and if we don't understand what we're seeing, because quite frankly, there's not many people talking about what it means.
Right.
So the three biggest, as far as I'm looking at things, as far as a general population sort of approach to what's transpired over the last 3 years, like in the Supreme Court, for instance. I mean, we have Virginia v. EPA, and then we have Roe v. Wade, obviously, but then Chevron. I mean, these three cases alone, uh, we've heard about.
Right.
Some people haven't; they have no idea. But we need to be educated in why these are so important, right?
Mhm.
The simple aspects of, let's say Roe v. Wade, for instance, on face value, people may think it's about killing babies, but really, 2 3 layers under it are the most important elements. And I'm not saying that it's not important, the element of, at face value, because it absolutely is, obviously. But the real deep inherent level of why this is allowed to happen is because the states and the rights of the people of the states. So
Right.
this had to be drawn back to the states and the people. And I've heard many, even politicians, Trump included, state about, hey, we got to bring it back to the states, to the states. So obviously their narrative on the mainstream media is to state otherwise. And
Right.
so, that with the EPA and these federal overreach in the agencies is a big part of that, because it was stating that these agencies aren't government agencies, they're subcontractors, and they're all subcompartment,
Yeah.
agencies that have no governmental authority. So what is that saying? Ultimately, we can use that as people, right?
Mhm.
So then you have the most recent, which is insanely crucial, is Chevron, and a big part of that is because of the interpretation of law.
Right.
One thing we have to factor in, and I don't agree in the fact that judges shouldn't be making rulings and judgments in accordance to law itself, but the problem is, what law, whose law? Uh,
Right.
and so when we go into a administrative court that shouldn't technically be in as people, and we're applied corporate, uh, let's say, elements that would apply to an entity or an agency, or them, our employees, quite frankly, applied to the people, that's I mean, in every way, shape, and form wrong.
Right.
Well, it's because they get to fill in the blank. And there was this sort of noose around the judicial level as well, in all the way down to the county. So the county is the states, they were, federally overtaken as well. And this is about interpretation of law. And that's what I mean by that, because now they had to fill in the blank a certain way. So if we didn't grasp what we were doing or saying or how this was being applied, and we would just unknowingly, unwillingly consent,
Yes.
it's really a dangerous situation. So we didn't know what we were getting into. A lot of times people don't. They don't know what sort of jurisdiction they're playing in when they go into these administrative courts, and they don't know how to apply it. And that's a travesty. So, when it comes down to it, it's in my opinion all about self-governing. So what does that mean? What does it mean to educate yourself in, not like I said, the minutia is important, but it's the education of why these things are playing out the way they are.
Right.
So that's really where the brainchild was of everything. I've been very heavily involved in volunteer efforts in a lot of different ways, whether it be on like, let's just call it a humanitarian end of just helping my fellow man, neighbor, so on and so forth, in efforts with like-minded people. Locally, we've been doing outreach, food programs, shelters, everything above, beyond, and in between. And with that, there's other efforts that play into kind of the think local impact sort of way. One of my former partners has a company that we do that with. So it's all about thinking local and bringing this in a local effort so we can help protect each other against the bigger looming elements of, whether it be federal or any other bigger looming element of it. And it really comes down to the simplicity of, we have more power in our pinky finger if we know how to wield that
Right.
against any of these entities. And it's the simplicity that is so stupidly simple that gets taken over by layers and layers. And
Right.
so one of our biggest tasks is not only the unraveling of the indoctrination, but it's the educating in uh, how to approach with the simple tools given to us. And I can give an example. So, for instance, if anybody found out that they would never have to go to court for any of these issues, but it would start by simply applying one of our protections. And let's just use the Fifth Amendment for an example. So if you have somebody knocking on your door, do you know what to do? Do you know what not to do? Most important part to realize is that our Fifth Amendment starts at that point in time, because they're all investigations by our service members. Now, if we don't call one of these service members, such as emergency response or fire or EMS or whatever the case may be, and they're doing an investigation, well, if we're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to worry about, right? So just say, sorry, can't help you, and move along, be on your way, right? Because otherwise they will find a way to come in, including CPS, HHS, DHHS, all these sub-agencies, which, by the way, are not government agencies. They are subcontractors, and they still inevitably work for us. That's why it's called Health and Human Services, because they
Right.
provide a service to us. So how can anybody force a contract? You can't. Exactly. Unless we consent. So
Right.
we're coerced and we're deceived and we're tricked into consenting. And
Right.
so these are important things about, like, hey, listen, if I had my own government and it was called my home, and if my branch of government was my family, well, what would you do? How would this be set up, and what would that look like? And essentially we all have that authority. But once again, when we're bound by administrative codes, rules, regulations, statutes, policies, procedures, everything that's not law, it's legalese in law, it doesn't help us. So we have
Right.
to remove the elements of the consent. We have to remove these things. And so this became kind of the brainchild of, how do we put this all together, right? How do we put all our pieces of the puzzle together? And that's essentially what's happened over the last 10 years, but more specifically over the last 3. On my end, we've really had just an unbelievable, incredible team that we've put together. We wanted to keep this completely off the commercial aspect, right? So there's so many NGOs out there that are really, really running amok, and they're so deeply entrenched in part of the problem. And, you know, it was like getting to the root of why. How is this happening? How can you be a non-governmental organization, a a registered nonprofit, but yet be so involved in the corruption? Well, it was a way to wash the money, essentially, right? So it would make the face value appearance be that, hey, we're doing this for good, you know, and then it would just ended up being a wash plant of deception. And so these big corporations, these commercial entities would then, you know, donate their money to them, and that was just, you know, really just heading a lot of the, you know, deep dark elements. So we're like, how could we do this differently? Well, let's just keep it as natural as possible. So we're coming from a place of, if if you had $0 and you needed help, what tools are available? What are some of the bigger elements that are causing the control? Well, that would be online first and foremost. There's a lot of tools available, but how do we apply this, right? So it's simply, educating people and giving them the free tools and resources where they can literally take one or two, you know, small steps and make a huge difference. And then they would be able to apply that in a case where, you know, let's say there were elements where they consented and they had no idea. So you can remove the consent. Here's a template how to do this, right? Here's a template how to remove the consent, and then to get them to stop and then enforce your rights. So if you were to able to do this in a 3-part process, notice, you know, a secondary follow-up notice with a letter of intent with, let's say, your own bill of rights or fee schedule attached, and then how to enforce it, right? 1, 2, 3, that's called an administrative procedure. So if we do this administrative process, so if we do this process in a procedural format that's very laid out, here's some basic templates that you can use, and do this on, let's say, a not Microsoft controlled sort of platform, like an open source like tool like LibreOffice, for instance, which is a centralized enterprise network such as Microsoft, and it's done through an open source network like LibreOffice. That's the nice thing about like Linux and GNU, which are kind of the computer tech side of things, but like it's what's really nice because they're all free open source tools. And that's where that's derived from. So, you know, the matter of, and I know I'm kind of getting in the weeds with a little bit, but, you know, the real important part about it is, why am I bringing this up? Why am I saying this? What does this have to do with a court case? When you realize that they literally copyright fonts, when they copyright, like, I mean, the printers and ink and everything you can imagine, everything is copyrighted. So if we're now licensed to use their products, but they're in ownership, what do we own anymore? So this is really about claiming our lives back. This is about using tools that we can now build, grow, and create our own reality. And that's essentially what the Self-Governing Academy is all about. So in that, it's 4 basic elements. We need healthcare, right? Healthcare is essential. So when we have a centralized allopathic medical system that is, and here's HHS again, rearing their snaky head involved. And so it's like, how do we break free of that? Well, you gotta get more involved in self-care, naturopathic measures, just things that are like more based on how they should be. Unraveling the need for insurance, because that's a huge part of the fraud. And everything in the commercial enterprise system of a government is based on fraud, essentially. And so that's one of the things in law, because fraud eviscerates all. So you got to find fraud, you got to prove the fraud, and then there's no statute of limitations. I mean, you can go back 200 years if you want, it doesn't matter, but go back to the inception point. And we have to do that in our own lives. So it's a really, really nice way for people to get the free education on these things. It's all something that I've really pursued as, kind of my mission, my puzzle piece, and collectively putting it together with, a good dear friend of mine. He's on X as HBO detective. His name is Joe. He's actually in the picture here, right?
Oh, nice.
Right.
Okay.
There.
Right there. Yeah. right? It's like, how do I figure?
It's weird here. So this guy right here. So that's Joe, and he has performance AI and Trainer MD. So this is all the alternative self-care sort of steps that we're taking, all decentralized, all giving the power back to the people to claim back their medical records, to claim back their health, to claim back everything. So it's partnering up with him on that. And we got to look at the monetary aspect of things, and then we got to look at the law aspect of things. So I've put together a really extensive package, and then a really simplified package on, very simple layouts. Like, here's templates for you, just go nuts, do it.
Right.
Keep in mind, this is all stuff that is involved in a legal pretense, but it is done from a lawful manner, right? So if you want to have standing, if you want to have the right, sort of approach to this, here's tools you can go about. And then it's all about putting these resources together, because if you think about the word law itself, it's very simple: land, air, water. So those are three elements we fundamentally need, the basics of life, the core of everything. If anything or anyone is trying to impede on any one of those three things, because without one, we will perish. So if anyone is trying to impede on that, that's a trespass, period. So we have to learn about using the words correctly too. Trespass, not trespassing. It's not past tense. This is now, past, present, and future, right? So trespass is trespass. Do not trespass, period. End of story, right?
Right.
These are things we need to kind of unwind, unravel, and re-educate, and just step back for a second, simplify it, and be like, all right, now what? So that really is kind of the basis of everything. As far as the national testimony and the national records go, this was the idea that was, hey, we need a safe place for people to go to if they want to give their testimony and share their testimony. There's a lot of people like yourself and so many others. I can't thank you enough, Audra, for the work that you and so many others are doing. It's so important that people get their testimony, but now what do we do with that? Right. How do we apply that? How do we use this as an exhibit, as evidence, right?
Right.
And how do we do this safely without it getting scrubbed? What are some tips? What are some tricks that you can do to secure this? And how do you present it in a way that is simplified, right? And so that's kind of where the national testimony came in, because this was kind of that place where people would be able to not only educate themselves on how to give a testimony, right? Mm-hmm. What are simple things like, listen, I want to tell my story, but I'm scared. What do I do? I'm terrified because I'm so afraid of people pushing me into a corner, but I'm sick of being in a corner. What do I do? Right. So this is a list of great resources, very, very trusted, vetted, non-ties to, other elements that would cause any interference. And it gives people the ability to also vet themselves, right? To learn what it means to vet something or someone. Very simple things to do. I call it a quick vet process. So it's like there's 3 or 4 things that you could just look at something laid out in the manner of the language, and you can vet it yourself. And these are things that I think people need to educate themselves in. Yes. Blend a little bit of street smarts with a little bit of book smarts, and I think we're all for the better. And I don't think there's any harm in just being cautious. Right. We don't need to be fearful anymore. That's where Psalm 23 comes into play. And we need to armor up with Ephesians, and we're good to go. Right. So once we walk through those scary times, and if we do it with a little bit of faith that the people that have been presented to us are ones that are put there for us, not against us, I think we're all for the better. So the national records then plays in, because it's more than a decentralized place to record information, but it puts it in a place that is on now lawful standing. So if you think about jurisdiction, just as law is an acronym to land, air, water, you can think about it being a jurisdictional standpoint too. So there's law of the land, and then there's maritime admiralty law, right, as well as kind of the air. So these are things that are all kind of presented in the self-governing aspect, but these are also we've kind of laid it out as, hey, here's the places, here's the resources, And we're trying to now integrate everything into educating and even podcasting and stuff like this, so we can get more people. Because I mean, yeah, we need to take over the MSM, and how do we do that? And so I've been in talks with somebody on kind of giving educational snippets on, hey, if you want to do even a voice podcast, or if you want to do a video one, these are kind of some tools you can use and stuff like that. So we're really trying to build out a way for people to apply these things in their own life. So, whether it be build a business or build your life and protect your family, these are all the tools available. It's not so much the 95% that has been presented to us in our life that's the problem, but it's the hidden hand of the 5%, right? It's the secrecy that has been left out. And so I think it's a travesty, but everybody needs at least these tools presented to them and resources. So.
Yeah, I mean, so it's great because what they've done, oh, that's not what they've done is great, but it's great what you're doing, because what they have done is intentionally kept us ignorant and uninformed and uneducated about these things, so that they can pull the wool over our eyes and make us think that all of their, rules, regulations, and statutes and things like that are for us, when in fact they're for them, to hold them accountable. But as long as we consent to it due to our ignorance and uneducated state, because of them doing it, that we just go along, we just capitulate. We're just like, okay, yeah, whatever you say, I have to do this because they said that I have to. And it's a great scheme because it works so well, because they can't have the populace like having this education so that we can go, no, that's for you. We're outside of that. We're actually above you in all of this. But as long as we think that we're subordinate, then we're just going to think that whatever they say, if they say jump, we have to ask how high and just go along with it. And so, an educated populace is like way more dangerous than the one that we have now, because, we just kind of, you get inundated with things. And so you don't really think that, I don't know, that we can step outside of it. So I think it's so important to be educated. And I think that outside of school, like for me, it's been really exciting to educate myself, or like, again, because it's like we learn all this stuff. And I remember being in school going like, when am I going to use this? Like, this is so stupid. Doesn't make sense. Why are, what is the point of learning all of these things? And it's because then it fills up all this time. You may use a couple things here and there, but if we could educate children from the get-go with this type of knowledge, it would equip them with so much like power and strength that we have that we're just not aware of. And imagine that kind of world, like to be able to shift that balance of them thinking that, that we have to just listen to them, where it's going to go, no, you actually have to listen to us. And we would be able to change our communities, because we could go in and hold these people accountable, but for real, not just kind of like, I'm going and I'm giving them shit or whatever. There's a difference. It's actually holding their feet to the fire and saying, no, either you do this or you're gone. And I think that the government has run rampant because of what they've done to us. And so it's a time for us to take that power back and really, teach it to others. So that's why I think it's so great that you're doing that. So like, what are some things that maybe you could say that you've done or help people with that could encourage some others to, potentially look into, or because I want you to share like your site and stuff like that where people can find this, but give me some examples of some things that you've been able to accomplish doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. You brought up some really good points. It's really about assertion, right? It's about asserting these rights. It's about standing in that authority. And obviously the education is important because it shows people how to do that. But you need the testimonials of that too. You need the test cases. And one of the things that's been done and proven is everything. So for the most part, what I've done on my end, I've vetted myself. So everything I've done as far as an educational pathway, let's just call it, it's been vetted through trial and error and through the evidence of what took place, what's transpired, and everything from, so here's some court cases, for example, that I can speak to, when things were applied and done in an administrative fashion. they've been able to either throw the cases out completely, they've been stopped immediately, or they've been taken to the point of like a lean process. So this is where accountability comes into play. So it was past the point where it was almost too late for them to just pull the plug, right? Them as in the DA and stuff like that.
Right.
So then it was, applied in a manner of, okay, well, you still have to go. And here's the thing: everybody has to realize this. It's all about consent. Everything, every single thing, because it's all about contract. It is every way, shape, and form of contract. It's a form of consent, whether it's tacitly, which means it was done with a fail because you failed to respond. Yes or no. That's called tacit acceptance. So that is a form that people aren't talked about. This is that hidden part of it, right? So these are little pieces that are part of this education. Okay, it's not complicated when you know that this, and this is all that matters. If you hear anything else in between, it just ignore it, because it has nothing to do with what's going on. You're going to hear a million different things. It's going to be, scary, and it's all tactics, because at the end of the day, it's about consent. And without your consent, and in everything, in every way, shape, and form, is to trick us into consenting.
Mm-hmm.
Consent your life away. That's
Yep.
where you sign on that X. Well, does anybody know what that means exactly? The X is the signature. You acknowledging that is the okay. That's the consent. So
Right.
you're putting yourself in a jurisdiction alone just by signing next to the X. I mean, it's just unbelievable. We have no idea what we're even doing. The fine print doesn't even matter anymore, because the X is all that matters.
Right.
It's like so ridiculous. Like, how did it get here? How did we get to this place? And it sounds so crazy. Well, you're just a conspiracy theorist. No, actually, it's the truth.
No.
I mean,
Yes.
because you're ignorant to the law, which they love to say that, right? Like
Yeah.
it's something called one of the maxims. It's a matter of ignorance. So ignorance to
Mhm.
the law is not an excuse. Well, guess what? We could throw that back at them now. And why are we able to? Because, like I said, this rolling back of the Supreme Court rulings, which are now in the favor of the people in the states. So, the keys really are, yes, the court uh, element is huge, right? There, like I said, the testimonies and in the cases that have been done in these manners, I've been able to help dozens of people, fortunately. And so, unfortunately, there are so many who need this.
Yes.
So this was the daunting task. It was like it like kept me up for I don't know how long, Audra. Like this was one of those things. It's like, oh my God, what, like, just show me, give me something. I mean, this is like insane. I know I can't put the world on my shoulders, like I'm gonna save it, but I mean, the fact of the matter is, like, I know I have information that people need. So
Mm-hmm.
how can I present this at where they're at? That was the biggest task, because it's like, okay, I'm suppressed to oblivion. I got kicked off Facebook. At that time I was banned on Twitter, which I finally got my original account back like a year and a half ago. But I'm like, at that point, I had like 9 posts that were left, and I was like, well, gee, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
This was an account from 2009 that I had too, by the way. And so it's like, wow, I have a whopping 9 posts left on this account. I'm like, well, what good is this at this point? I'm like, other than validity of having an account in 2009, yay.
Right.
I'm part of an active crime scene. Congratulations. So it's like, really that's what it is. And I think it's funny because, Elon, he bought the largest active crime scene, not just
Yeah.
for speech. So there's that. But I think it's really good that people get to pluck and decipher and determine where they're at. And that was the answer. Because as a few of us were going through these things, and we're like, it's so apparent that this is all about education.
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing is education, and like without it, we're doomed. People will perish for a lack of knowledge, right? And
That's
books
right.
will the keys of knowledge. And so with these things combined, it was like it's a no-brainer. This is all educational, because this is what people need. And the wonderful thing about that is, it's like how information is presented is also crucial. It's great to know history. Okay, it's great to know, where to give trusted information and where to find trusted resources. But the most important part about it is, how do you apply it? That's the key, because once you can apply it, now you can defend yourself in the future. This is the armor, the shield, and the pen that we can use as a sword, right? So these are the things that are so crucial, and that's really what it came down to. It's like, it's not about what I did or what we put together, but it is, because now there's a pathway. We have an administration that's being set up finally that will not only be there as a tool also, because keep in mind, they're employees of ours, right? They're public servants of ours. So now we finally have an administration that will actually listen. So now we still have to get to work, and we still have to do the work on our end, because if we don't tell our employees what to do, they're going to do what they want.
Yes.
And going to make whatever they're doing a focus factor. So this is such a crucial time where we can't get too involved in the narrative, because we have to get excited, but excited that finally we have people that are probably hopefully going to listen to us, right?
Right.
But here's the key also: if they don't, what do? We have to prove them. How do you do that? Well, here's the process. So once again, it all goes back to the education. Listen, I've set myself up in a place where if the government crashes and burns, I'm good. I don't need them, right?
Right.
I can trade a cup of milk for a cup of sugar. I can do it with my neighbor. I can trade silver that's internationally accepted at a certain rate. That's the thing about gold and silver. It's not about hoarding it. It's about what somebody else is willing to accept. Now, if it's internationally accepted and traded at an X amount of rate, guess what? We've already eliminated the need for the bartering aspect of what its value is, right?
Right.
So that's the wonderful thing about it. But if we don't apply that in our own lives, how are you going to digitally mint anything, and how are you even going to know what that means and what that looks like? If you have no idea what the deep, dark rooted elements on what system things are being used, how are you ever going to know if cryptocurrency is the right thing, right?
Right.
How are you ever going to know? Now, this is where it's important to educate yourself. So, I think I hope that answers your question, but that's kind of the key takeaway that I really wanted to instill, because it's not necessarily, we can provide, like Joe, for instance, he did, let's just say a test case use in a matter of, medical facilities with nurses, programs and things like that, which it didn't end up going through. Why? Because they would lose money, going to a program that would benefit people, because guess what? You eliminate the need for their services.
Yes.
And so when you eliminate the need for the services, the medical industrial complex doesn't want what you have to offer. Weird how that works, So it's like, okay. And that's the thing. So it's like, okay, well, yeah, we've proved this, a million different ways this Sunday, but at the end of the day, what does it matter? It's a benefit for the people, not the industrial complex, right? So this is the important takeaway that I want to instill, because I've been able to apply it, but I've also studied thousands and thousands and thousands of hours, and I've applied it in my certain scenarios, and I applied it in ways for helping others, and this is how it helped them. So now it's just a matter of taking, like I said, wherever somebody's at that point in time, there'll be a module, an educational module for learning that at where you're at. So it's like, how do we reach everybody where they're at? Well, here's the information, it's presented. Now you can just literally grab where you're at. Better than me, and so on and so forth.
Right. Now, like if somebody say I wanted to get some of your materials, and I'm looking at it, and it seems really foreign to me, because so like, is there a process where they can kind of get educated first through your like what you're doing, and then get these types of documents that could potentially help them in their life? Do you recommend doing that first, where it's like, you need to kind of learn the elements of it so that you can understand it enough, so you understand like whatever document you may be presenting to somebody, so that you're not doing it ignorantly again, right? Like we're just kind of going with the whim because it seems good. I mean, because it feels better to educate yourself and understand like what you're actually dealing with, so that you understand why you're doing it. Do you know what I mean? So is that something? Yeah, go ahead.
That's a great question. And I'm going to say it this way. If you're anything like me, whatever I'm about to say is not going to matter because I'm the type of learner that, like, I'm a serial learner to a certain extent, but I learn fast. I know how my mind works, and so do each and every one of us. So
Right.
I can grasp things. My dad taught me speed reading when I was a young kid, so that's one thing that helped me. So I can pluck information that I need, and then I
Mhm.
can go forward. Well, the thing is that doesn't always work for everybody, but it does work for some people. Now, if you can read fast, get a gist of the information, I would never deter anybody from being ambitious, right? I'm super ambitious, and if it wasn't for my relentless pursuit and truth and justice and honesty, I also wouldn't have gone through what I needed to go through in my life in order to get where I'm at. Does that make
Right.
sense? So, like, I would never
Yes.
deter anybody, but yes, as far as an approach, I would say I would absolutely at least have a starting point. If this is all brand new to you, if you have no idea about the law, but you know you want to make a change and a difference and you want to protect yourself and your family, 100%. So there's going to be small educational videos that
Mhm.
are learning modules. So they're 2 to 3 minute clips. So this will be, for instance, like, there'll be an intro 101. Okay, so what is law 101, right? So that's a intro series. So there'll be, let's say, 4 videos that are 2 to 3 minute segments, and then there'll be a quiz. So at the end of that segment, which you've spent a whopping 15 minutes now, and you've
Right.
educated yourself on the 101 of what law is, and it's broken down, and it's done in these clips, which are very, very simple. So there is this pathway of, yes, you have to really be aware of the layers. It's not
Right.
about what works and what doesn't work, because the biggest thing, if anybody is telling you out there that this is the way and the only way, I'm going to call BS, because there are multiple ways depending on what applies to what man or woman out there is going through whatever situation. Now, because there's different jurisdictions of law, that's why I can unequivocally say you're full of crap. Because what law are you talking about, and where do you stand in this law? Like, are you talking about on a state county level? Are you talking about a federal level? Are you talking?
Right.
Is this an international issue? Now, international, are we talking global international, or are we talking state to state international? Because there's a difference. Now, do you have lawful standing, or are you talking from a legal perspective as far as, like, what it means to have a lawful path of something, right? So these are all factors. But if you don't get the layers of this, if you're not educated in the difference between, an incorporated world and an unincorporated world, you're never going to know the difference. So
Right.
that in that manner, I would say yes, it's absolutely crucial and essential to educate yourself in the differences. Why? Because it's only going to help you. It's only going to benefit you, and it's not going to be to any cost. You know what I'm saying? So, like, the way things are presented, like, these are very, very crucial things that people need to know. And to, as far as I'm concerned, like, yes, and this has nothing to do with money or anything like that, because I mean, I feel like, yeah, there's that level of, yeah, I mean, we all should, value ourselves, but the key takeaway with that is, you know, recognize that you're priceless first and foremost, that you have no cost associated with you, therefore you can't be bought and paid for.
Right.
But yes, fruits of your labor are involved as well, and what you put in, you should also be receiving of as well, but we have to be receiving of that in order to get that. So where I'm coming from, more of the information is, this is like the information that everybody has to know, that should
Mhm.
be absolutely free without a shadow of a doubt, right? This is stuff that has been hidden, and this is the deep dark elements that really have ensnared mankind, quite frankly. And when you talk about trafficking, what is trafficking truly? The fact that by sex we are known as M and F, and
Mhm.
and what is the difference between letters and people or persons? And I mean, this is the ridiculousness of the nature of what it is. So this in itself is used in a form of sex trafficking. Why? Because it's by sex. MF, male, female, not only the physical aspect of it, which absolutely 1,000,000% is there. It is very much there, and it needs to be addressed more than anybody could ever imagine. But without the knowledge of these small intricacies of how they go and the depth of how they get to these places, and why they're able to hide behind so much of this crap, that's the key. And the key element of what people need to be educated in. So the simple basic outlines, yes. The quizzes that are there are just for them, right? It's not going to be you fail like an educational sort of thing, but it's a matter of, yeah, this is why. Now move on to the next step. And then if you're interested, so at the end of a quiz or whatever, it'd be like, if you're interested in applying this, go click this link, right? So the link will then take you to the section where all of so the tools section will be then PDF and Word doc forms that people can modify and use and apply in their situation. So it's all really seamlessly integrated in a real simple educational process.
So I love that. And I'm thinking like, because I know there's a lot of people that would think that this is like a conspiracy theory, like you're saying, and just that this is kind of bogus information, but it's only because of what we've already been taught.
Mm-hmm.
Would you almost try and tell people, or what would you tell people like that are coming in new, that believe the system the way it is and doesn't necessarily agree with it, but doesn't understand that that's not reality? Would you like suggest possibly like leaving the education that you've had already at the door and trying to just be open-minded completely when you're absorbing the new information coming in, so that you can not compare it, but in a way of going, well, that doesn't seem right because this is what I've been taught, but to just like re-educate, to kind of come in with a clean slate so that you can, have this information come without it being hindered by the indoctrination?
Yeah, I would venture to say, and that's actually a really good question, Audra. I would say a year or two ago, I would have agreed with that. And it's not that I'm not agreeing with it now. I would say that I would come from a standpoint of, don't forget about the education you were given, but now educate yourself in the scenario that would apply. So here's an example. I would say in a process of from when we were born, or the immaculate conception point, let's just say. So that the minute that spark took place and the baby was created, that is where I would consider life to start. Okay.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Now that could be scientifically debated. I don't really care. Now,
Right.
When you come into the world is when you're born. Okay. So when you're born into this world, you're born, you're at your most natural raw state possible, and you're just a living being at that point in time. Okay. Now, as a living, breathing being with a heart and a soul, you are in your most powerful authority, although you aren't developed as an age of majority yet, which would be known as 21 years of age. So you don't have all the learning experiences of life and all of the stuff that life has to offer, right? But interestingly enough, you're at your highest level of authority, okay? Because you don't have any attachments to you don't have any contractual obligations until your mom signs that birth certificate. That's where the inception part is, right? Then the father cuts the cord, right? Removing ties. So now you have discarded the placenta, the umbilical cord, and all of the attachment of the afterbirth, which they then attach in a form of DNA. So this is where a lot of this trans agenda is coming into play, okay? So why do I say that? Well, it's important because if we know the inception point of when, like I said about fraud, it's all fraud, right? Because there's a monetary attachment to anything in the commercial world because it's all based on commerce. It's an exchange, the fiat currency. So it's all part of that world. Now, if we go back to the inception point of where it is, well, we can remove the elements of everything, right? Just by saying from the time of, the inception of birth or the point of being born, I remove all of the elements of consent, so on and so forth. But more importantly, the education is crucial, but how many pieces of paper you have on your wall seems to be more of a harmful thing in some cases, because people get stuck in the element of what their accolades are as opposed to how it's applied. They're still at the end of the day living people. Listen, if you're a doctor, if you're a lawyer, that's great, fantastic, more power to you. But don't tell me for 1 second that when you're home, in your home with your wife and your children, if that's the case, or your significant other or your pets or whatever, that is not your private domicile, because that is your private domicile. Now, somebody can't come into your private home and start telling you where to put your couch and your rug and your furniture. You'd be like, go get bent. Who are you? Like,
Right.
what would it matter? Now, is there any sort of legal pretense behind it? Absolutely not. That's absolutely insane. Well, when we go into their house, it's the same thing. Now, a court is a house. It's their jurisdiction. It's their house, right? So it's their rules. Unfortunately, if you're not going to agree to those rules while you're in their house, they're going to tell you to get bent too. And that's just the nature of what it is. So the fact of the matter is we need to know what our education is and how it applies at certain different points. And that is the biggest thing I would say would be to apply these things. Don't abolish your education. Be open-minded, absolutely, into the point that we have been misled. Now,
Right.
the more educated people are, in depending on the field, the medical industrial complex is more profound than you can ever imagine, especially because of the HHS looming overreach and all
Right.
of their involvement in so many different. I mean, they're tied into the DoD, they're tied in internationally, they're tied in globally, they're tied in with the WHO, they're tied into everything, literally. As far as I'm concerned, HHS is the head of the snake, and that's, well, in hindsight, I'm happy. In one respect, like I said, we have an ability now to petition these people
Yeah.
for redress and grievances, but we have to be open, aware that, hey, listen, I was part of an indoctrination station. I didn't just get on the train. Like, I grew up in Auschwitz. Like, we really need to be aware of this factor. Like, we are living in a one world government
Right.
until we say no more. So we can remove ourselves from that element. We can be of this world, or in the world, but not of it, right? This is how we do this. So it's a matter of correcting the issues that are at hand. And I think it's implored in us to do so. Like, it is really, really a matter of us knowing how to do that, remove these levels of attachments. But if we don't do it, then what are we doing? We're just consenting to allow it to happen.
Right.
So if you're educated in one thing, if you have a name attached to you, or an acronym or a letter, if you're an MD or an ND or whatever you may want to be, that's great. More power to you. But listen, don't tell me for 1 second that your name is defining who you are as a man or a woman, because that's the thing we need to be aware of. And that is what has ensnared us into this unilateral system of control.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how well it's worked and how much, just when I've learned these types of things, it's been really freeing, because you don't, like, they try and keep us within their constructs their fake constructs that they put up, and we just kind of go along with it. And it's empowering, and it's really freeing to be able to step outside of that and understand what our authority is, and understand that just because they say they have it doesn't mean that we have to consent to it. And I think that, it's like teaching people that it's okay to say no. Like, even with COVID, I felt like COVID was something that really brought us into this place of just like, you have to listen to these people. If they tell you you have to get this shot, you have to get it. If they tell you you have to wear a mask, you better do it, because then they kind of set the dogs on you. And if you don't, then the police will come or whatever. But it's something that I think that a lot of people going through that started to educate themselves as well in this realm, because it was like, wait a minute, can they tell us that that's what we have to do, that we have to stay in our home, that we have to do all those things? And the more that we do it, like, you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. And so it's like, for me, that's why I love to be able to share this information with people, because I want them to take their authority back. I want them to understand that you can say no, and you don't have to just go along with it because they make you believe that you do. And it's almost like, when you're in school and you're a kid and they're telling you to just sit down and shut up and listen to whatever they have to say. I'm not saying like kids shouldn't, like, whatever, but I mean, it's that whole thing of just like, you have to do this, and this is the way it is. If that person has like a jacket, a white jacket, they have authority over you in some way. But we're all people. And so I think it's just really neat to be able to see a different side of things, because I think a lot of people understand there's something wrong, but they don't know what to do, and they feel kind of helpless, right?
Yeah, I agree totally. So one thing that I think will be kind of fun to show
Yeah, please.
is this. So Are you familiar? Have you ever heard about the four corners rule at all?
No.
Okay.
I know.
So here is a piece of paper, right? So obviously there's four corners. So
Right.
when we're taught to write something on a piece of paper, this paper, depending on what's written on it, becomes what it is. Right now, just as is, it's a white piece of paper, nothing more. Well, if you write this on it, sorry,
Notice, right.
sorry
Mm-hmm.
for my chicken scratch. So you can
No, it's
see notice,
good.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So to the woman from the man, that's just
Right.
whatever. I'm using that as just an example. So this becomes now not a white piece of paper. Now it's a notice. So now you're writing this to somebody. Well, guess what? On the backside of this, what is it?
Four corners of white piece of paper.
White piece of paper.
Yeah.
Interpretation of law. The front side may be a notice, but guess what? Depending on what's written on this notice, the judge or whomever receiving this notice, they're going to look at this and be like, what? It's a blank piece of paper. I don't see anything. Why? Because they put it face down.
Right.
And they're like, what? I don't see anything. It's just a blank piece of paper. So why am I saying this? Because when you reserve your rights, when you maintain your rights, all rights reserved, right? So this is all now your rights you're reserving. That means including the margins, right? Which they love to use the very tippy top and the footer, right? At the very,
Right.
very bottom, right? So now you can do this. You could simply state over. So at the very bottom of this, you can write the word over, right?
Okay.
So here, for example, you would say page. So we'll write page. In the footer of this, we'll put page 1, and you can either say front or whatever. So page 1 front, and then you could write like something like this, right? So page 1 front and then over. So then on the back, whatever is written or nothing at all, because maybe you don't need to, you just are doing a one pager. So then at the bottom, you can do something simple like this. I read like a fifth grader, sorry. So, so you can do something as simple as this. So here's the front. We have our notice, okay? So this is notice to the DA. This is notice to CPS, HHS, whomever, right? To the woman who stole my child from the man who wants his child back, right? Notice, I demand that you return my child, my progeny, or ASAP, right?
Right.
Dated, so on and so forth. Now, why do I talk about this? Because not only is this all in a matter of the rules of what is being outlined on this, which is considered an article or a notice, but interpretation of law, right? Meaning this is either criminal or civil. So
Right.
the front side of a page would be whatever it may be in a scenario. So one side is criminal, the other side is civil. Now, if the back side is blank, guess what? They interpret it how they want. They get to fill in the blank. If it's
Right.
blank, they will write whatever they want. How do you stop that? Well, you simply do this. So I write at the bottom right, all rights
Yeah.
reserved without prejudice by John Matthew, right? So now what you're doing is you're essentially serving a notice. You're giving them notice on the back by getting the last word,
Right.
right? Because now this is the bottom last word and it's by the man known as John Matthew, right? So this is
Right.
you stating you're reserving your rights without prejudice, right? And something like so simple like this, I don't have to do anything else. But now I'm not leaving it blank and it's not open to interpretation and I'm serving notice in a lawful manner. Guess what? They can't do anything about it and they can't try and pull some, hoodwinking nonsense on you. So that's just a small thing that we can do. What does it mean to say by? Well,
Right.
you're informing who is asserting the message, right? It is by the man known as John Matthew, right? It's by the woman known as Audra. it's called a byline. It's not the X, which marks the spot, right, of a commercial entity known as a person. So I'm not saying that, in the, even from the Bible perspective, it talks about persons and how to not accept certain things of the person. And that's what that means, because if you look up a definition of a person is an entity. It's also described as an individual or a corporation. Now,
Right.
an individual, okay, well, why doesn't it say man or woman? Like what? It's
Right.
because it's anything but that. It means
Right.
they get to decide which one of those definitions. Well, there's 4 different definitions exactly, and they get to pick one they want, which best suits them at that point in time. So, as far as definition of words and stuff, we need to be aware that it's not how many definitions there are, or it could be one. It's no, how many are going to be used against us. Okay. Just like the Fifth Amendment. Shut up, or this will be used against you in a court of law. It doesn't say it will be used to help you in a court. No, it will be used against you in a court of law.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
My bad. Yeah, that's so is this something like if people were, if, say like me and I go to the board of supervisors, I could give them a notice to stop doing the things that, not everything, you wouldn't just say like stop doing everything you're doing, but if there was something that was pressing, say we're in the days of COVID and they were trying to force the county to capitulate to whatever terms they set out, is this something where I could bring this to them, serve them with it, and then follow through with the process, and then in hopes of them, surrendering to that so that I could make a change?
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, it's something you have to do. So, one thing I love that you do is your voice is being heard and you're informing them. They can't hide behind plausible deniability anymore.
Right.
You're not only providing them verbal notice, but you're doing it with video evidence. So the wonderful thing about that is you're doing it. You're being proactive. Not only are you informing them in the most powerful way almost, but now you're giving them an opportunity essentially. But as long as these things stay on the record, that's assuming that they're not going to scrub them from their database, right? You have to keep them on your end, but also what are you going to do going forward? So just, this is one thing and I used to do this too, because I would assume that because I said something, they're automatically going to take action. Well, they're evil criminals. Like, what, looking back, I'm like, God, how naive was I? Like to think that
I was too.
Yeah. And so this is where it's really, really crucial for us to apply this, right? So now what? Now what do we do? Well, for our employees, it's like everybody knows how to sweep a floor, but if you don't tell the janitor where the areas are to sweep, right, he's just going to start sweeping. Well, then you can't just go up to him and say, oh, well, why didn't you sweep that back area? It's like, well, you never told me. Well, you should have known. Oh, really? Like that's one thing that we all get caught up in. And it's very innocent, out of sight, out of mind, but in the same sense, like, yeah, we really do have to tell our employees what we want now. So we have to go to them and we have to demand for them to do, in accordance to law, obviously, what we require of them. Now, this is where we can enforce that. So that's step 2. So you already did step 1, which you've noticed them, right? You've served literal notice to them. Now, we can assert that with writing, yes, but now this is where we can enforce it, because now step 2 is technically being done when you demand or require what actions to take next. But you also have to put in there a caveat, because here's the thing. Just like they coerce us at the beginning, I was kind of talking about how they, nefariously get us to accept a contract or consent to things. That's called, in part, when they don't tell you, but we should have known, it's called tacit acceptance. So we can also use that against them. So we can state something like this. I, Audra, require you to now remove any mandate or demand for the people of XYZ, right? Whatever county or state or whatever level you want to go to. Now, failure to do so, failure to respond to this requirement, this request, after being served notice, right, for 30 days, 60 days, whatever it may be, an honorable thing to do would be give them 30-day notice to respond. Now, they know better. They've all been served notice, okay, for the most part. You obviously have, that's your evidence. You don't need to prove that. Now, we need to enforce that. So failure to do so will be seen as your tacit acceptance of the fraud and the harm. You are now knowingly aware of this and doing this and allowing this to continue. You will, number one, be required and bound to the layout or the list of my fee schedule. So then you have a fee schedule. So for any trespass that occurs, right? For any theft, for any forced entry, for any forced shot, for any whatever the case may be, you know, your requirements are listed out. And guess what that is? That is your Bill of Rights. Okay. So a fee schedule, a Bill of Rights, and now them failing to respond, which you're going to send this either registered mail or first class with tracking on it. You know, now you have a trail of evidence. This is admissible in court, absolutely, because number one, registered mail is the highest secure level of mail you can send, first and foremost. But you get a tracking card, so you get a green card return receipt in the mail, which you can either opt in for signed or not, whatever. Either way, it gets federally lodged in a register. Okay, it gets recorded on the record. So now you have this recording number of this green card, right? Which now you receive back in the mail, which is evidence that it was received and delivered through a secure form of mail delivery. But now you can use this as being admissible. But how are you going to enforce it on them? Well, you give them the opportunity to make corrective measures. If they don't, now they're going to be responsible in both monetary and by removal of office. This is how we remove those who refuse to do what is right. This is how we correct the measures on big levels. We each have to do this individually on a small level. That's why our local areas are so crucially important. If we don't petition our government for things, right? If we don't enforce what that means, if we don't educate ourselves in what it means to petition for a redress of grievances, okay? Our grievances are whatever you bring upon them, which is harm to the people. If you are a witness, which you are a material witness of harm because it happened to you, right? Just like it happened to me. We have to petition them now to make corrective actions and measures. Now, as public servants, whether they're part of the municipality, the county, or on a state or federal level, it doesn't matter. It's all one and the same. They all answer to us, we the people.
Right.
Okay. So they're supposed to have their boundaries and they're supposed to stay in their lane, but they haven't. They've crossed over in so many different nefarious ways. It's disgusting. We just have to lay it out and do it. So this is all part of what's known as the administrative procedure. And the nice thing about it, Audra, is this can be done outside of court. So we don't have to step foot in court. Now we can enforce this in court, which then you could take it to a District 1 or a federal level court, wherever your Supreme Court is in your state, if you choose to. And now with the Brunson case, I mean, this is the exciting part of this coming through because Rule 11 applies. And now for the first time in history, this has actually been brought forth, not just pro se, but from an individual standpoint. Like, this is incredible stuff that's happening right now. So now we have really the doors and the gateways fully open for us to petition, but we have to do it. Because otherwise they're going to be like, well, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? Well, look at all this. Dr. Fauci did this and they did that and CPS did this. And okay, great. But where's the evidence that you gave them the opportunity?
Right.
Now they
to
can't
correct.
on that. Exactly.
Right. Yeah, I think it's important. I think, this should be something that, we all educate ourselves on so we can take it to these public officials and really start holding them accountable for the actions that they're taking because we've stepped back, they've just gone and they think they rule the roost, and I always kind of say it's like if the king steps out of their chair, someone's going to fill it. And then as soon as you come back and you're like, hey, what are you doing in my seat? Then it's like, well, you were gone. So, I mean, now I'm the ruler, and so it's like, no, we got to flip that script again so that, we can get things back over center and start really changing our communities. And that's what I say to people all the time. It's like local is where it's at because we can only do so much on a national level. We can vote for a president, whatever, but it's in your local community that everything that's happening is being decided. They don't really have any say over that. They're just they can do some things here and there, but this is a place where we can really start to make our community exactly the way we want it. We just have to step into that and understand that we have the authority to do so. And so I love that you have the tools for people to do that. And oh my gosh, we could go on forever. I went past, I'm like, I told you an hour, and then I'm like,
I
oh
know,
my
I'm sorry.
no, don't be sorry. I feel bad. I'm like, oh my gosh, because we could go on for a long time. That's why I'd love to have you back and come and share more. But right now, like, where can people go as far as like a website or whatever to get this information?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. So right now we're finalizing some final steps on the Self-Govern Academy. So it will be on selfgovern.academy. That's in its final stages right now. So in the meantime, I have a lot of this information. Like, I have a lot of the tools, and there's pathways on X on my page. And my page I made searchable. Bear with X right now. Sometimes the algorithm doesn't allow you to search at certain times, but I'm fairly good at keeping up with it. So if you type in keywords like, for instance, notice, if you just go on my page and type in notice, it'll show you layout, like basic outline templates. Here's some templates on how to serve a notice. Here is how to mail a notice. I have all of this stuff on my X page right now. We do spaces quite often. I'm involved with a lot of spaces. If you want to go to that, it's at real, REAL, John, JOHN, MK, and that's on X. And until then, so hopefully in the next, I would say, week or so, it should be all finalized. So then you'd be able to go to Self-Govern Academy, and that's going to tie in national testimony, national record. So it's all going to be tied in at that point in time. But in the meantime, I'd say, yeah, go to X for now. I have a lot of searchable things on there, so you can definitely get a lot of information that's to come through there.
Awesome. And what can people do to support you?
Really just, spread the word as far as notice who, like, that question, it gets me every time. Support me by supporting the things that we're doing. So the people involved, the information that's being presented, but also, really get it out there and share it. So what I say is, take what I've done as a template in a pathway and create your own. That, I would say, would be, I would smile bigger than anything if you took the outline that I had. So create your own, Self-Govern Academy, create your own national testimony, national records. That I literally, like, through all the free tools, like, you can use, I'll tell you right now, go to Canva, go to LibreOffice.org, download LibreOffice. It's a Microsoft Office sort of like open source thing, right? It's available for Mac. It's done all through Linux, right? So it's like, it's all decentralized. It's all off of that element. Why is that important? Well, because you can cross collaborate, first of all, between Mac, PC, Linux-based systems, but also you're not really controlled by the corporate overreach. Go to Canva or go to some of these other free platforms where you can create, a logo, create your own brand, start building your life the way you want based on your image, your vision. That, apply it forward, pay it forward in that way. And I think that supports what we're doing, more than anything, because that's really what it's going to take. But yeah, definitely share the information, share our content. That really, really does help.
Yes, that's awesome. And, it's funny because I hate answering that question too. I'm like, I don't know. Oh my gosh, I feel weird answering that. But what are some parting words that you'd like to leave with our audience?
Yeah, just keep shining your light and do everything in truth. Do everything you do in truth, and everything you put forward will come back. And the seeds you plant and sow now, you will be rewarded tenfold. Absolutely.
Amen to that. Love that. You're going to have to come back on, because it's like we could have sat here and talked more about this for a while. And I was like, oh my gosh, he might have to go, and I don't want to be rude. But it's a great information, and it's something that we should all be, have access to, but just be privy to, and it's like, it can change the world around us. And that's what I'm all about. It's like, we got to be the change that we want to see, and it takes us, and it's not hard to do. We just have to be willing to kind of step back into that position so that we can shape our communities. And it's a lot easier than people think. And I feel like it's addicting. Like, like I thought too, like going to these meetings or whatever, just doing anything, I'm like, they're going to listen. It's going to be so great because like they're supposed to. And then I was like, oh my gosh, no, they don't. This is way different than I thought. I was like, now I got to go with a different approach. I mean, but it's an education that I'm like happy to be a part of, and just to continue down that path. And it doesn't keep me from going, but I just have a different approach, and it will continue to evolve because I think that it's empowering to like have a say in your community, even though they don't just listen all the time. It makes a difference, so every move that we make, every step that we take is going to move the needle forward. We just have to really just step into that. And so I'm so thankful that you came and shared your time with us today, and look forward to having you back. And it's just a blessing. And so keep doing what you're doing, and I look forward to seeing where it goes, and potentially taking some of this and trying it on my own. So thank you so much. And
absolutely, thank you for having me.
Yes. Thank you guys for joining us. I hope you enjoyed that. You can educate yourself some more with some more information, and, we can start to just take things back the way it's supposed to be. And so join me next time where I bring you more truth, love, light, and all of the good things. God bless. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye, you guys.